My beloved child, do not scroll away from this moment. Pause here, because what you are about to hear carries a truth your heart may recognize before your mind understands it. Something happened when your soulmate went searching for answers about you, something they never expected, something so unsettlingly beautiful that the person they trusted to explain your future suddenly could not continue. She had been speaking confidently only moments before. Then she looked again, her expression changed, her voice disappeared, and the room became so quiet that your soulmate could hear their own heartbeat. She did not finish what she had begun. She simply stared at what was before her and whispered words your soulmate has not been able to forget since. You must understand why they went there in the first place, because it was not curiosity alone. Your soulmate had been carrying questions about you for longer than they wanted to admit. They had tried to silence those questions. They had told themselves that perhaps you were simply another person who crossed their path at the wrong time. They tried to explain away the strange pull they felt toward you, the moments when your name appeared in their thoughts without warning, the way certain memories of you returned at night when everything became quiet. They tried to be practical. They tried to move forward. Yet the harder they attempted to dismiss what they felt, the stronger one question became: why does this person feel different? That question followed them everywhere. It followed them through conversations where they smiled but were not completely present. It followed them while they worked. It followed them when they heard certain songs. It followed them during those strange quiet minutes before sleep, when the mind no longer has enough distractions to protect itself from what the heart has been trying to say. Your soulmate began noticing that whenever they imagined their future, there was an empty space they could not explain, and somehow that empty space carried your presence. They did not know whether to trust it. That is why they searched for an answer outside themselves. They wanted someone to tell them whether they were imagining everything. They wanted certainty because uncertainty had become exhausting. They wanted someone detached from their emotions to tell them what they could not decide alone. And so, on an ordinary-looking day that would become anything but ordinary, they entered a small room expecting a simple reading about love, timing, and possibility. But heaven had already prepared something neither of them understood. The woman sitting across from your soulmate had done this many times before. She was calm, collected, and familiar with nervous people arriving with questions they were almost afraid to ask aloud. Your soulmate sat down and tried to appear casual, but there was tension underneath every movement. They did not immediately say your name. They did not immediately explain everything. They only admitted that there was someone they could not stop thinking about. You. The psychic asked several ordinary questions. Your soulmate answered carefully. At first, the atmosphere remained light. There were small smiles. There was even a moment when your soulmate wondered whether coming there had been foolish. Perhaps they were expecting too much. Perhaps they would hear vague words that could apply to anyone, leave disappointed, and finally force themselves to stop wondering about you. Then the psychic began speaking about their emotional past. She mentioned hesitation. She mentioned a connection that had been interrupted by timing, fear, distance, misunderstanding, or circumstances that had never fully reflected the truth between two people. Your soulmate stopped smiling. She described someone whose presence had affected them more deeply than they had admitted. Your soulmate shifted in their chair. Then she said something that changed the energy completely. She said, "The person you are asking about has been misunderstood." Your soulmate looked up immediately. Those words hit differently because somewhere inside them, they already knew. They knew there were things about you they had judged too quickly. They knew there were moments when your silence had been mistaken for indifference, your distance mistaken for rejection, your strength mistaken for coldness. They knew that perhaps they had looked at certain pieces of your story without ever seeing the whole picture. But the psychic was not finished. Not yet. She closed her eyes for a moment as though trying to concentrate more deeply. When she opened them again, her expression had changed slightly. The confidence was still there, but underneath it was something your soulmate could not identify. Surprise. She asked, "How long have you known this person?" Your soulmate answered. The psychic became quiet again. Then she asked, "Have they ever told you everything they have survived?" That question landed heavily. Your soulmate thought about you in a way they had not allowed themselves to think before. They remembered moments when your eyes seemed to carry stories you never explained. They remembered times when you changed the subject rather than speak about your pain. They remembered how you could encourage others while keeping your own wounds hidden. Suddenly, little details they had overlooked began rearranging themselves into a different picture. But something even stranger was happening across the table. The psychic was no longer looking at your soulmate. She was staring downward. Her fingers had become still. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from ordinary curiosity into something your soulmate could feel but could not name. Stay with this, because the silence that followed was not the ending. It was the beginning of the part your soulmate has been replaying ever since. The psychic finally lifted her head and asked whether your soulmate had a photograph of you. They hesitated. For reasons they could not explain, showing your face suddenly felt incredibly personal. Yet they had come looking for answers, so after several seconds, they opened their phone. They searched through their photos longer than necessary, passing images that had nothing to do with you until they reached one they had saved. Yes, saved. Perhaps you did not know they still had it. Perhaps you believed they had forgotten more than they actually did. But there it was. Your face. Your soulmate placed the phone on the table. The psychic looked at the image. And everything stopped. She did not speak. At first your soulmate assumed she was studying your expression, searching for some intuitive clue. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. Then longer. Her eyes moved from the photograph to your soulmate and back again. The certainty she had displayed earlier disappeared. Your soulmate became uncomfortable. "What is it?" they asked. No answer. "What do you see?" Still nothing. The woman slowly pushed the phone back across the table. Your soulmate felt their stomach tighten. They expected something frightening, but what happened next was far stranger. The psychic said quietly, "I don't think I should finish this reading." Your soulmate stared at her. They thought she was joking. She was not. They asked why. The woman shook her head. "I've already said more than I intended." Confusion became frustration. Your soulmate had gone there specifically because they wanted answers. Now the person they were paying to provide them was refusing to continue at the exact moment the reading had become meaningful. What did you see? The psychic looked at the photo again without touching the phone. Then she said, "You came here asking if this person belongs in your future. But that is not the question you should be asking." Those words made your soulmate lean forward. "What should I be asking?" The psychic hesitated. And in that hesitation, something inside your soulmate knew that whatever came next would change the way they thought about you. The woman finally said, "You should be asking why you were allowed to meet them at all." Your soulmate went completely still. Not because they understood. Because they didn't. That sentence opened a door they had not known existed. Why were they allowed to meet you? What was that supposed to mean? They pressed her for an explanation, but she seemed reluctant to continue. Your soulmate could see an internal struggle behind her eyes. Part of her wanted to end the session. Another part seemed to feel responsible for giving them at least enough truth to understand why she was stopping. So she asked one final question. Did this person come into your life during a time when something inside you was changing? Your soulmate's memories moved instantly. They remembered exactly when you appeared. They remembered who they were then. They remembered what they believed about love, trust, themselves, and the future before you crossed their path. They remembered how meeting you stirred emotions they had buried. They remembered how you challenged parts of them without trying. They remembered the strange discomfort of being seen by someone when they had become skilled at hiding. And suddenly your connection looked different. Not easier. Not simpler. Different. The psychic watched your soulmate's face and seemed to know the answer without hearing it. "That is what I thought," she said. Then came another silence. "My beloved child, there are moments in life when truth does not arrive loudly. It enters quietly, rearranging everything without asking permission. Your soulmate experienced one of those moments in that room. They had walked in hoping to hear whether you would call them, whether there would be a reunion, whether the future contained romance. Instead, they were being confronted with something far deeper. They had underestimated what meeting you had awakened inside them. And perhaps you have underestimated it too. You have wondered why certain connections can remain emotionally alive even through silence. You have questioned whether you were foolish for feeling deeply. You have wondered whether you cared more than the other person, whether your presence mattered, whether your absence was noticed. But there are things people do not confess when they are confused. Sometimes silence is not emptiness. Sometimes silence is where someone goes when their feelings have become larger than their explanations. Your soulmate's silence toward you has held questions they did not know how to ask. And one of those questions was now sitting between them and a stranger who had suddenly refused to tell them the rest. Your soulmate insisted. "Please. If you saw something, tell me." The psychic breathed slowly. She looked almost uncomfortable. Then she said, "I don't see this person the way you described them." That sentence shook your soulmate. They had already told the psychic what they believed about you. They had mentioned your personality, your history together, the misunderstandings, the moments of closeness and distance. They believed they had presented a fair picture. But apparently, the woman believed something was missing. Your soulmate asked, "Then how do you see them?" The psychic looked directly into their eyes. As someone who does not yet understand their own impact. Your soulmate's expression changed. They were expecting something mystical and complicated. Instead, she described something painfully human. She said you had spent so much of your life questioning yourself that you did not always recognize how strongly other people experienced your presence. She said you had learned to survive moments that could have hardened you, yet some part of you remained capable of deep feeling. She said people sometimes mistook your sensitivity for weakness because they did not understand how much strength it takes to continue caring after disappointment. Your soulmate listened without moving. Because now she was describing things they had seen. Little things. Things they had never connected. The way you remembered details others forgot. The way you noticed changes in someone's mood. The way you could withdraw when hurt instead of creating chaos. The way your strongest reactions often came from caring too much rather than too little. The way you sometimes acted as though you needed nobody, even when some quiet part of you desperately wanted to be understood. Your soulmate suddenly remembered moments when you had been emotionally closer than they realized at the time. And with each memory came regret. Not the kind that destroys. The kind that awakens. They began wondering whether there had been times you were offering your heart indirectly because you were afraid to place it somewhere it would not be protected. They wondered how many signs they had missed. But the psychic was still holding something back. Your soulmate could feel it. So why did you stop? They asked. The woman looked at the photograph again. Then she said, because the future around this person does not feel settled. Your soulmate's heart dropped slightly. They assumed that meant something negative. But the psychic quickly clarified. Not settled doesn't mean bad. It means there are choices that have not been made yet. Important choices. Your soulmate became even more focused. By them? By both of you. Now everything felt suddenly personal. The psychic explained that some futures are built through ordinary momentum. People follow habits, routines, expectations. Tomorrow looks similar to yesterday because nobody interrupts the pattern. But sometimes a person arrives who becomes a crossroads. Not because they control your destiny. Not because everything is magically predetermined. But because knowing them forces you to become conscious of choices you were once making automatically. Your soulmate realized that you had been exactly that. A crossroads. Before you, they could avoid certain emotional truths. After you, avoiding them became harder. Before you, they could pretend they needed less from love. After you, they knew they wanted something deeper. Before you, they could accept connections that never reached the most vulnerable parts of them. Then you appeared, and suddenly shallow comfort no longer felt like enough. That was why forgetting you had been so difficult. It wasn't only because of who you were. It was because of who they became aware of when they were around you. That realization frightened them more than attraction ever could. Because attraction can be dismissed. Transformation cannot. And this is where the reading became even stranger. The psychic asked your soulmate if they had ever dreamed about you. Your soulmate hesitated. Their hesitation answered the question. There had been dreams. Not every night. Not dramatic visions. But enough to make them wonder why your presence continued appearing in places their conscious mind could not control. Some dreams were simple. You were standing somewhere familiar. Sometimes you spoke. Sometimes you did not. Sometimes your soulmate woke with the strange feeling that they had been trying to tell you something. Other dreams left behind emotions stronger than the images themselves. Peace. Longing. Regret. Recognition. The psychic listened carefully. Then she asked, and after those dreams, do you usually think about contacting them? Your soulmate looked away. Yes. They had. More than once. There were messages written and deleted. There were moments when they opened your conversation and stared at the screen. There were nights when their fingers hovered over your name. There were words composed internally that never reached you. You may have interpreted their silence as certainty. It was not certainty. It was conflict. Your soulmate had been arguing with their own heart. And the psychic had somehow touched the center of that conflict without being told. Now she leaned back in her chair. She seemed calmer, yet even more serious. You need to understand something, she said. This reading cannot make your decision for you. Your soulmate nodded impatiently. They did not want philosophy. They wanted the missing answer. Why had she gone silent when she saw your photograph? Why had she refused to finish? What had she noticed? And then they asked the question directly. When you looked at their picture, what happened? The psychic did not answer immediately. Your soulmate asked again. What did you see? The woman's eyes softened. I saw someone carrying two versions of themselves. Your soulmate frowned. The psychic continued. One version is the person the world has convinced them they are. Your soulmate listened. And the other? The psychic's voice became quieter. The person they are becoming. Something about those words caused your soulmate's entire body to tense. Because suddenly they remembered your struggles differently. They remembered your doubts. Your setbacks. Your periods of isolation. The moments when you seemed lost. Perhaps they had assumed those things meant you lacked direction. But what if they had been witnessing transformation? What if some of your hardest seasons were not proof that you were failing, but evidence that an old version of you no longer fit? The psychic said your future could not be read like a straight road because you were standing at the edge of personal change. She did not tell your soulmate that you would suddenly become perfect. She did not promise impossible things. Instead, she described something more powerful. You were approaching a season in which you would have to decide whether to keep living according to what hurt had taught you or begin living according to what you actually believed you deserved. And your soulmate was connected to that choice in a way they had not understood. Not because they were your savior. Not because you needed them to complete you. But because love has a strange way of revealing where two people are still hiding from themselves. Your presence had revealed their fear of vulnerability. Their presence had revealed your fear of being abandoned after opening your heart. Both of you had awakened something in the other. And neither of you had known what to do with it. This is why there may have been moments when the connection seemed strongest immediately before one of you pulled away. Closeness exposed the places where healing was still unfinished. Distance offered temporary safety. But safety and peace are not always the same thing. Your soulmate had spent a long time confusing the two. They believed avoiding the connection would quiet their heart. Instead, distance amplified the questions. The psychic seemed to understand that. She said, "You keep asking whether this person is thinking about you." Your soulmate froze. Because yes, they had been wondering exactly that. But that is not the important question, she continued. What is? Why are you thinking about them? The room became silent again. Your soulmate had no immediate answer. Attraction felt too small. Nostalgia felt incomplete. Loneliness did not explain it. They had thought about other people before. They had missed other people before. Yet something about you carried a strange persistence. Your memory did not simply return. It evolved. Every time they revisited what happened between you, they understood another layer. Words that once seemed unimportant gained meaning later. Moments they once dismissed began feeling significant. Even your mistakes looked different when seen through greater maturity. And perhaps most painfully, their own mistakes became clearer too.